If you are bleeding, you fix it yourself. If you are broke, you figure it out. If you are emotionally broken, you hide it and go to work anyway. For an entire generation of people, asking for help does not just feel uncomfortable, it feels like a terrifying vulnerability. But why did an entire demographic collectively decide that surviving alone was the only valid option? What happened in their formative years that rewired their brains to reject assistance and rely solely on themselves? Today we are diving into the deeply ingrained psychological blueprint of Generation X, the famously forgotten middle children of history. By looking through the lens of developmental psychology, childhood trauma, and cultural shifts, we are going to unpack exactly why the Latchkey kids learned to handle everything completely alone. We will explore the hidden costs of this hyper-independence and why understanding it is crucial for anyone who loves, works with, or is a part of this generation. The story begins with the environment that shaped their earliest brain development. Imagine being 8 years old. The school bell rings, and you walk home alone. You reach into your pocket, pull out a house key attached to a shoelace, unlock the door, and step into absolute silence. You lock the door behind you, make your own snack, do your own homework, and entertain yourself for hours until your parents get home from work. This was the daily reality for millions of Gen X children. They were the original Latchkey kids. In the 1970s and 1980s, dual-income households became the new normal, and divorce rates skyrocketed to unprecedented highs. Suddenly, the traditional family structure dissolved, and children were left to manage themselves. From a psychological standpoint, this created a massive shift in attachment styles. Children naturally look to their caregivers to co-regulate their emotions. When they're scared, sad, or confused, they need an adult to help them process those feelings. But for Gen X, the adult was not in the room. They had to learn how to self-soothe, self-regulate, and self-manage long before their brains were developmentally ready to do so. This early environment forged a deep-seated belief that they were ultimately on their own. But coming home to an empty house was just the beginning. The real psychological shift happened when they realized nobody was coming to rescue them. Because they were left to their own devices, Gen X developed a profound sense of self-reliance. If the microwave caught fire, they put it out. If a sibling got hurt, they played doctor. They absorbed the adult responsibilities of the household because the adults were consumed by economic pressures and their own relational turmoil. In psychology, this is known as parentification. It's a process where children are forced to take on the practical and emotional duties of an adult. While this builds incredible practical competence, it also leaves a lasting emotional scar. The child learns that their own needs are secondary and that relying on others is a gamble they cannot afford to take. They learn that adults are fallible, distracted, and often overwhelmed. Therefore, the only person they could truly count on was themselves. This brings us to a psychological mechanism that most people completely misunderstand, and it is the exact reason why Gen X struggles with intimacy today. Hyper-independence is often praised in our society as strength, but in reality, it is a well-documented trauma response. When a child learns early on that reaching out for help results in disappointment, neglect, or being told they are a burden, they construct an emotional fortress. They vow to never need anyone again. As these children grew into adults, this defensive mechanism calcified into their personality. Gen X adults will often exhaust themselves trying to solve an insurmountable problem rather than simply asking a friend or partner for a favor. It's not about pride, it's about safety. Asking for help requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires trusting that the other person will actually catch you. For a generation whose foundational experiences involved looking around an empty room for support, trust is an incredibly scarce resource. They manage their finances alone, they process their grief alone, and they fight their battles alone, because the alternative feels like stepping off a cliff. Think about your own life right now. When you are completely overwhelmed, when the walls are closing in, the pressure is crushing you, and you feel like you are quietly drowning, who do you call? Or do you just go quiet, isolate yourself,
pull away from your loved ones, and try to fix it entirely on your own, while pretending everything is perfectly fine. If that hits a little too close to home, what you're about to hear next is going to explain exactly why you do that, and how it is secretly destroying you. The cultural backdrop of Gen X only reinforced this internal isolation. They grew up in the shadow of the Cold War, under the constant, looming threat of nuclear annihilation. They watched the Challenger explode on live television. They saw the rise of the AIDS epidemic, the crack epidemic, and the steady erosion of trust in public institutions following Watergate. The message broadcast to them by the world was clear. The people in charge do not know what they're doing. The systems are broken, and the world is fundamentally unsafe. This bred a distinct brand of cynicism that became the hallmark of 1990s culture, from the grunge music of Nirvana to the apathetic slacker stereotypes portrayed in movies. But that apathy was just a shield. Underneath the flannel shirts and the sarcastic eye rolls was a generation of people who cared deeply but knew that showing they cared was dangerous. If you don't expect anything from the world can't let you down. This macro-level cynicism mirrored their micro-level family dynamics. They learned to expect nothing, ask for nothing, and handle whatever came their way with a grim, quiet determination. But here's the most fascinating part of this entire psychological profile: the hidden superpower that this extreme isolation accidentally created. Because Gen X was forced to navigate life without a safety net, they became the most adaptable, crisis-ready demographic alive today. When the economy crashes, when a pandemic hits, when a company is falling apart, Gen X doesn't panic. Panic requires the expectation that things are supposed to be okay. Gen X never expected things to be okay. Their baseline was chaos, so when chaos arrives, they simply roll up their sleeves and get to work. They are the ultimate pragmatists. They possess an incredibly high tolerance for ambiguity and stress, which makes them exceptional leaders and problem solvers. While younger generations might seek consensus or emotional support during the crisis, and older generations might rely on established hierarchies, Gen X simply looks at the resources at hand, makes a decision, and executes. They are the people holding the structural integrity of society while nobody is looking. However, this superpower comes with a devastating price. The physical and emotional toll of carrying the weight of the world without ever sharing the load is immense. We are now seeing the long-term effects of this hyper-independence as Gen X enters middle age and beyond. The chronic stress of chronic self-reliance leads to burnout, high blood pressure, and a profound sense of loneliness. Many Gen Xers find themselves surrounded by people, successful in their careers, holding their families together, yet feeling entirely unseen. They are the sturdy pillars holding up the roof, but nobody ever asks how heavy the roof is. Because they never complain, people assume they don't need support. Because they always have the answers, people forget they might have questions. They have trapped themselves in a paradox where their extreme competence isolates them from the very human connection they actually crave. This cycle has to break. The silent suffering of the forgotten generation does not have to be a lifelong sentence. If you are a Gen Xer, or if you recognize this pattern of hyper-independence in yourself, you have to understand that your armor did exactly what it was supposed to do. It protected you when you were small, vulnerable, and alone. It got you through the empty houses, the societal chaos, and the personal crises. You survived. But the war is over. You don't have to live in survival mode anymore. Being fiercely independent is a badge of honor, but recognizing that you no longer have to survive alone is the ultimate victory. It takes immense courage to lower the drawbridge of that emotional fortress. It takes bravery to look at someone and say, "I don't know what I'm doing, and I need your help." You spent your entire life proving that you can handle everything alone. You have nothing left to prove. It's time to put the armor down. You can ask for help now, and you might be surprised to find that this time someone is actually there to catch you.